A knight's body was found mounted on a bridge of blades. This is the true story of a medieval murder that was also a message, carved not in stone, but in steel and flesh. By the end, you will understand the brutal theater of power that could turn a man into a monument. We must ask who this knight was and why his death required such a grotesque stage. What does it mean when violence becomes a symbol? The discovery itself was as chilling as it was confusing. It happened not in a grand cathedral or a royal tomb, but at a forgotten river crossing, a place where muddy banks met cold, shallow water on the edge of what was once a fiercely contested borderland. For centuries, local stories spoke of a cursed ford, a place where metal gleamed under the moonlight. When archaeologists finally investigated, they found the truth was stranger than any ghost story. They did not uncover a bridge for the living, but a bridge of the dead. It was a macabre sculpture, a brutal installation art of war, constructed from the shattered remnants of hundreds of battles. Spears were driven deep into the earth to form unstable handrails. Swords and polearms were lashed and woven together, their blades pointing in every direction, creating a treacherous, glittering path across the muck. This was not a structure meant to be crossed, it was a statement meant to be seen, and at its heart, mounted upon this jagged throne of steel, was the armored body of a single knight. The immediate questions were overwhelming. Was this a simple battlefield trophy, a way for a victor to boastfully display the spoils of war that seemed too petty for the staggering effort involved? Was it a territorial warning, a grisly signpost telling enemies exactly what fate awaited them if they dared cross this river, or was it something deeper, something older, a ritual sacrifice to dark gods of war or river spirits using the ultimate offering, a noble warrior and the instruments of his profession? To find answers, they had to start with the knight himself. His armor became the first manuscript. Forensic analysis of the metalwork, the style of his helmet, the method of riveting on his plate, all pointed to a specific time and place. He was not a peasant soldier. The quality of his gear marked him as a man of significant status, likely a landed knight or a minor lord. His own sword, still in its scabbard, showed a distinctive heraldic emblem on the pommel, though time and corrosion had made it difficult to read. This was no anonymous casualty. This was a specific person placed with deliberate, terrifying ceremony. The very act of building the bridge around him suggested his identity was central to the message. Someone wanted him to be found, and they wanted him to be remembered in this exact, horrifying way. The heraldry on his sword pommel was the first real clue to a name. While faded, the design was distinct enough for historians to match it to regional records. It belonged not to a nameless soldier, but to a man named Sir Alaric of Thornwood, a landed knight sworn to a powerful duke whose lands bordered this very river. Sir Alaric was recorded as a formidable tournament champion and a trusted military commander, a man of significant renown and, crucially, substantial personal wealth. His presence here in this brutal display was not random. He was a high-value target, a symbol of his lord's power. The political landscape at the time was one of seething tension, a cold war between rival ducal houses that occasionally flared into open skirmishes over trade routes and river rights. This ford was a strategic flashpoint. Sir Alaric's disappearance from historical records coincided precisely with one of these violent flare-ups, a period where Chronicles note sudden, fierce fighting along the border, but offer no clear victor. This context transforms the bridge from a random atrocity into a calculated act of political theater. His murder was a message, and the message was for his duke. By desecrating the knight's body in such a public and humiliating way, the perpetrators were not just killing a man, they were annihilating his lord's honor and demonstrating absolute control over the contested territory. They were saying, "We can take your strongest, your most celebrated, and turn him into a monument to our power on the very ground you claim." The forensic analysis of Sir Alaric's remains added another chilling layer. He did not die in the heat of a chaotic battle. The nature of his fatal wounds told a clear story. He had suffered several serious injuries consistent with combat, a broken collarbone, a deep cut to his thigh, but these showed signs of early healing. They were days, perhaps a week old. The killing blow, however, was a single, precise thrust from a dagger between the plates of his armor at the base of his neck. This was not a wound received on a battlefield. This was an execution. The evidence suggests Sir Alaric was captured alive, wounded but surviving, held for a period, and then brought to this specific location for a deliberate, ceremonial killing. He was marched or carried to the river's edge, forced to witness the construction of his own ghastly tomb from the weapons of his own men, and then coldly dispatched. His body was then mounted, a final insult, upon the glittering structure. This changes everything. The Bridge of Swords was not a trophy display created after a fight. It was the intended stage for the murder itself, built in advance with a grim purpose. The knight was not a casualty of war, he was its sacrificial centerpiece. This bridge was never meant for crossing. It was a monument of pure psychological warfare, a message carved in steel and flesh to be read by anyone who dared approach. Every element, from the sheer number of weapons to the placement of the knight's body, was a deliberate symbol. In an age where most people could not read written words, this violent sculpture spoke a universal and terrifying language. It transformed a simple geographical feature, a river ford, into a theater of dread. To understand it, we must think like the people who built it. For the rival faction that captured Sir Alaric, this was not merely about killing an enemy. It was about breaking the spirit of an entire community. By using hundreds of captured and broken weapons, they were symbolically annihilating the military strength of Sir Alaric's lord. Each bent spear and notched sword represented a defeated soldier, a shattered unit. Assembling them into a grotesque structure demonstrated that the victors now owned these spoils completely. They could even bend them to a new, horrifying purpose. The knight mounted at the center was the crowning symbol. He was no longer an honorable warrior granted a Christian burial. He was made a permanent part of the warning, a guardian of this cursed place, his body and soul denied peace to eternally reinforce the message of his captor's dominance. History offers us stark parallels for this kind of calculated terror. Centuries later in Eastern Europe, Vlad the Impaler would become infamous for creating forests of stakes upon which he mounted his enemies, a visual horror designed to paralyze invading armies with fear. In medieval England and Scotland, the bodies of executed traitors were often gibbeted, hung in chains at crossroads or river mouths, to rot publicly as a grim reminder of the king's justice. These were not random acts of cruelty. They were state-sanctioned communications, using the human body as the ultimate billboard. The Bridge of Swords operates on the same brutal principle, but it adds a layer of profound sacrilege. A river crossing was a liminal space, a threshold between territories often associated in older, pagan beliefs with spirits and deities. Some historians suggest the monument might have been a perverse offering, blending the practical terror of medieval politics with much older, darker rituals. By offering a high-status knight and a wealth of refined metal, both incredibly valuable, to the river, the perpetrators could have been seeking to appease or enlist the aid of primal forces, ensuring their dominance was blessed by powers older than any duke or king. This syncretic act, merging warfare with ritual, would make the site not just politically dangerous but spiritually contaminated, ensuring local folklore would carry the warning for generations long after the swords had rusted away. The legend itself became the final, enduring weapon. The question of who built the bridge leads us into a tangled web of medieval motives. Several powerful figures and groups had the means, the opportunity, and a potential reason to commit such an act. The most immediate suspect is the rival baron whose lands lay directly across the river from Sir Alaric's lord. For a nobleman embroiled in a bitter border dispute, the bridge would be a perfect, if horrific, strategic statement. It would secure the crossing not with a garrison of living soldiers, but with a permanent monument of fear, demoralizing the enemy and proclaiming absolute control. A chronicle from a nearby monastery, written years after the probable date of the murder, mentions a local lord celebrated for his cunning in defense. It describes how he once, quote, made the river itself stand guard, a phrase that historians now scrutinize as a possible, poetic reference to the grisly installation. This lord had the resources, the manpower, and a clear political incentive to turn his captured rival into a warning sign, yet rival nobles were not the only ones capable of such theater. The early 14th century was a time of profound social upheaval marked by frequent and violent peasant revolts. Could the bridge have been the work of commoners, a brutal symbol of their rage against the knightly class that oppressed them? While large-scale revolts were documented, they tended toward destroying manor houses and tax records, not crafting complex symbolic structures from battlefield weapons. The technical skill required to construct the bridge and the specific use of heraldry and armor as focal points suggests the perpetrators understood the language of noble power intimately. They weren't rejecting that language, they were wielding it with twisted expertise. This points more toward professionals of violence, like a freelance mercenary company. Such bands, often loyal only to the highest bidder, were infamous for their cruelty and psychological tactics meant to secure future contracts through a reputation for utter ruthlessness. A display like the Bridge of Swords would be a gruesome advertisement, proving they could deliver not just victory, but total terror. One name emerges from the Chronicles as a particularly compelling candidate, a warlord turned mercenary captain known as Rutger the Red. Ballads and clerical accounts describe him as a man of theatrical and symbolic cruelty, who once, after capturing a castle, was said to have draped its gates in the cloaks of the defeated garrison. A fragmentary song from the region tells of a knight of the thornwood tree who was given to the river on a bed of nails. While not conclusive proof, the alignment is striking. Rutger operated in the area during the right time frame, commanded a large and well-equipped company, and had a documented history of creating spectacles from his victims. For a man like Rutger, the murder of Sir Alaric would serve multiple purposes, fulfilling a contract for a rival lord while simultaneously burnishing his own terrifying legend, a win-win scenario built on one man's horrific death. This is where the search for truth becomes a battle with shadows. The medieval record is a patchwork of biased chronicles, fragmented legal documents, and poetic ballads that blend fact with folklore. A monk writing a history for his patron might omit a lord's dark deed to preserve his reputation. A bard's song might exaggerate a mercenary's cruelty for a better story. We are left piecing together clues from sources that were never meant to be objective evidence. The absence of a direct accusation in any surviving court record is, in itself, telling. It suggests the perpetrators were either too powerful to accuse or that the act was so effective it silenced all discussion, allowing the legend to do the work long after the swords rusted. The Bridge of Swords, therefore, stands as a perfect crime of the medieval mind, its architects hidden not by stealth, but by the very potency of the symbol they created. The true horror of this story lies not in the act of killing, but in the act of display. Sir Alaric was transformed from a man into a message, the central figure in a monument of pure intimidation. His death was a public performance, a piece of political theater staged at a contested border to communicate a truth more powerful than any battle cry. In the medieval world, power was not just about winning fights, it was about controlling the story, and nothing told a story of absolute dominance more clearly than turning your enemy into a permanent, horrifying landmark. This case reveals a brutal logic where psychological warfare was as critical as cavalry charges, where fear could secure a frontier more effectively than a stone castle. The Bridge of Swords was a weapon of mass demoralization built to break wills and rewrite the map in the minds of everyone who saw it or heard its legend. While the precise names of the knight and his killer may be blurred by centuries, the monument they created speaks with terrible clarity. It stands as a stark testament to the darkest intersection of violence, symbolism, and raw political calculation. It reminds us that history is not just written in chronicles and treaties, but sometimes forged in cold steel and anchored in the silent testimony of a single, sacrificed life. What do you think was the ultimate goal of such a grim spectacle, and what other historical mysteries of symbolic power should we explore next? Share your thoughts below, and if you want to join more deep dives into the shadows of the past, be sure to subscribe.